There we go. That feels like a harder fade out than it used to be. It used to feel a little bit softer. I blame that.
Yeah, I think so.
Because he's not here. All right, everybody. Well, today is Monday, except you guys will be seeing this on Tuesday. So because it is Valentine's Day on February 14th, and that happens to fall on our annual Tuesday live, we decided to go ahead and do it live, or well, I guess pre-record it, so that we'd be able to spend Valentine's Day with our families or our significant others, but you guys would still get the content that you're used to regularly occurring. So that is my long spiel there at my disclaimer at the 2-minute mark. So we have Mr. Justin Armenta from JA Digitizing Studios. I'm Jeff Fuller from Fuller Embroidery Works, and we here today are going to be talking about plotting points. We'll be doing so in 3-ish softwares. We'll see if we need to pull out another software to show any type of make any example. There we go, the words I was looking for. But we'll be starting out here today in Pulse. We'll be talking a little bit about the ways that you can plot points, and some of the things that I think is really neat about Pulse I'm going to be able to go over here shortly. So let me go ahead and pull up my screen. And Justin, if you have questions and or want to throw popcorn at me, throw popcorn at me.
Yes, I'll make comments for the peanut gallery.
There we go. All right. Well, I have DG16 up here. This is the Maestro level, which has pretty much everything in it. But it really helps illustrate something that I want to show here. So our edit tools are over here, and you can see they're kind of it's not a purple and it's not a pink. It's kind of in between. I'm
kind of in between.
Yeah, because these up here, these are the sequin tools, and they're actually a pink. These ones are a little bit darker shade. These are our edit tools. We've got our select, our node edit, our stitch select, backdrop, stitch angles, slice. So those are our edit tools there. We have some of the functions up here like cross stitch, cascade, fur stitch, some of your, I guess, stitch effects that are going to be here. And they're teal blue. Up here in purple, we have our editing tools. So, okay, that's a dark purple. That's like 3 purples, pink, pink, purple, and purple. But that is going to be our drawing tool. So we're going to be able to do like a line, rectangle, circle, and some auto trace for when you start getting into bitmaps. And that finally brings us to this group of blue tools right here. So the group of blue tools are actually our digitizing tools. And that's what we're going to be talking about today and how we are able to use those tools to digitize. And coming, as I learned, I learned in Wilcom and Hatch, and then I learned in Wilcom. And so coming from them, the tools, they're fairly similar. They're just called something different. So we'll go ahead and we'll start off here. This is our manual stitch. So this is like if I'm actually going to plot every stitch. Every click is literally a stitch of the software. So I might use this to jump between one letter to another letter. So I have a long jump stitch in there so that I can trim that out with some scissors. Or if I want to make something really small here as a lock stitch, I can manually do my own lock stitch as I move on. That's some of the uses of this tool, but it is every stitch, every click is literally a stitch. There's no curves. There's no anything. It's just every click is a stitch. And so I'm manually placing them. And that's why it's called the manual tool. Keyboard shortcut for that is F5. So if I hit F5, now I'm in that mode again. And backspace, if you ever place a node that you don't want, and I think this is pretty universal across almost every software, if you place a node that you don't want, you hit the backspace key. It takes it back one or one pair.
Yeah, I've seen that in digitizing and even vector art programs.
So after we have, of course, our manual, that brings us to our run, which can be anything from and I think I can set it up here. We'll see if it's going to let me. Yep. So I can do like a 2-ply, a bean stitch. That's where these are going to come in at, is our run stitch tool. And that is, we start with our left click or right click. And right clicking is actually going to cause curve nodes. Left click are cusp nodes, right? Curved and cusp.
Or straight nodes if you A
straight.
simple way of calling it. Yeah.
Yep. But if you can see, you can actually see these are like Bezier curves, like what you would have in a drawing program, and you can see that it's setting those angles, and I can actually see those. Now, while I'm digitizing, I can't go and edit those. I can just see them. I can't edit them, but that gives me an idea of where they're at. So again, that's left click for a cusp or a straight node, and right click for a curve. And enter to finish the object. So if we go back to, we're going to go into our vertex select or our edit mode, right? And this is where, and it's really, really faint. And so I'm going to zoom in here, but you can see the yellow, and you can actually see that I have my handles here to grab and move and adjust the properties of that curve. So if I'm doing something that, let's say I want to do a circle and I only want to have 2 nodes, or I only want to have 4 nodes, I can do that utilizing those Bezier curves to be able to reduce the number of nodes, which becomes helpful when you're doing something like a font or anything that you're actually planning on the person being able to really scale. The less nodes you use, the easier it is to scale it in either direction.
And just a quick note, the difference between the manual stitch and the running stitch, even though he is plotting just a single plot or a single line of stitches, the difference between the two is a running stitch is the distance between each needle penetration is going to be set in the settings of the running stitch. You're going to actually set a stitch length. So it's not every point that he's plotting is going to be a needle penetration, but it's actually going to be set within the parameters of that running stitch.
Yeah. So for example, if I click on show dots, and I don't know if you can see that, every one of these black dots is a needle penetration. In this software, it tells me over here, my stitch length right there is 3 millimeters. It's a run style of a run stitch. But actually I have up here as well on the top, I have my stitch length. I have a drop or run stitch at anchor points. I can actually set my start lock and my end lock stitches up here at the top, and I can assign commands to it as well. If I want to trim, stop. And if I had a Tajima machine, I could actually set some of the functions on the machine, such as slow it down, speed it up, that kind of stuff here. So, but again, that's with the run stitch tool. It's just going and you're plotting. And if I hit the O key, which is something that's really, really cool, it'll actually close the open shape. So if I was doing a run stitch around an object and I go, oh, wait, when I get around to the other side, I go, I didn't want that to be a run stitch because I want to be able to close it. One of the nice parts about this software is that you can hit the O key and actually close that shape, and now you can edit it or convert it, in this case, to like a complex fill, which is something that's kind of unique to this software that I know in Wilcom, if you're doing a, and yeah, I can turn it into complex fill. But in Wilcom, if you're doing a run stitch and you go around, you actually just can't close the shape. So that is one of the things that's unique to that. And I'm going to put a couple of stitch angles there. And now we're going to clean off the screen once again. So we've done our manual stitch, we've done our run stitch, and now we have column. Column is, this would be like a column A in Wilcom. It's basically your point and counterpoint system. So I'm going to click and I create one side. I click and I create the other side of the satin. And now I come up and I set my next 2 points. And that line, let me move this out of the way. This line right here is going to be my stitch angle between the 2 points. So my shape is, this is my rectangle, and the 2 ends on those end edges are where the stitch angle is going to be. I can do that and move around. If I right click, it ends the object in this. So I'm not really able in this particular one to throw down a curved node very easily. But that will actually bring us to the next one, which over here is the enhanced column. So the enhanced column is basically the same thing, but if I right click, I'm now getting those curved nodes. So this would be very much so a column A in Wilcom. I can look at my stitch angle. Do you ever have that feeling where you catch yourself from pointing at the screen and saying right here? But Down here in the very bottom left of my screen, you can actually see that I have a distance. So that's my distance that I'm going this way. I've got my angle, and I've got my X and Y. And what I'm looking at too is my width. So this, if I'm going to have to redraw an object as I'm digitizing, I can actually see what that width is to make sure that I'm not going too wide or too narrow with the column stitch. I hit enter, and between every one of those, again, set of points I've put, it's put an angle line, and that's what's delineated here. You've got positive and your negative. And that is our satin tool. So that would be like a column A. Next up, we have our satin path. Now the satin path is actually, if I pre-measure the objects, then I'll use, and I know everything's safe, I'll use my satin path. If I need to know the distance between and how wide an object is, as I'm digitizing, I'll use the column, enhanced column. So for this, I would just go ahead and I'd move around an object. And then when I get to the end of the object, instead of hitting enter, I'm just going to move to the inside of the object, and I'm going to go ahead and go around. And we'll go around this way. And then when I'm done, I can either hit the O key to close it if I want to, or I can hit enter. And it's going to just draw the object for me. You can see it has a single stitch angle, and that's where I can come in. It'll immediately go in to ask me where I want to place my stitch angles. So then I can drop my stitch angles in and assign them across. So this would be a lot more like the column V tool. And then I hit the G key for generate. So in this software, you hit the G key to generate your stitches if it doesn't automatically update. And now that I've placed my stitch angles and I've hit enter, now I can just go ahead and go right back into drawing a satin path. And again, it's going to go right to placing my stitch angles, which is really nice. I like it when it goes straight into setting my stitch angles for me right away. So that is satin path. I have to remember what it's called in Pulse, so I can call it by the next name, the appropriate name. And now we have, they actually call this a complex satin. But this is going to be where I'm able to do a complex fill. And one of the fill types that you're able to do is a satin. So this would just be drawing objects around a point. I'm going to hit the O key and I'm going to hit enter. And then it's going to want me to put in my stitch angle. And I can hit enter again. And when in doubt, hit the G key to generate your stitches. I'm in wireframe mode. I can actually go in and out of wireframe mode just like you can in any other software. And I'm going to turn off my needle penetrations. So this is basically I'm going to have my density up here at 4 millimeter or 0.4 millimeters. So that means that between a run, a return, and the next run is going to be 0.4 millimeters. And then like the run stitch, this is also going to have a stitch length that is going to be preset. That's the word I was looking for, Justin. So it's gonna have, it's gonna have a preset stitch length at, let's say 2.5 millimeters, 3 millimeters, 4 millimeters. Generally it's 3.5, but I'd have to double check. And this is over here in this box. This is where I'm gonna be able to see that kind of stuff. I've got my density, I've got my random, and I've got my stitch length right here. And it's set at 4. If I wanted to change that, I could change that by overriding my stitch length and setting the value that I want. And again, I have up here, I have my fill type, my pull comp I can set here. I can set my underlay just by ticking some boxes. So I have my underlay values over here, but I can just tick these boxes as well. And then I can go down here and drill in more into the settings. Or if I have settings I like, I can save those. And that is your digitizing tools that we have there. And the ways that you can input the nodes in this software. So I don't know if you have any questions, Justin. No. It's another software, right? So we'll go ahead and I'll remove my screen here. We actually have Matthew Enderley from Patch Phrase jumping in and joining us. I gave him this much warning before I went ahead and pulled him up on the screen. but we have Matthew joining us, and now that concludes our Pulse DG16 section. I don't know if you would like to do Wilcom E4.5 next, or if you guys want to do Hatch.
I'll slide in with Wilcom.
Yeah, that way I actually can figure out what we're doing, because I just got off like a 12-hour workday or whatever. I'm shot.
So we're basically on the different ways of inputting plotting points for digitizing in the different software. So Jeff just went over how to plot points in manual stitching, running stitches, the different options for satins and fills in Pulse, and how it works in Pulse. And I'm going to go over pretty much the same things in Wilcom as well, just to kind of go over the different menus that this could be pretty overwhelming looking at the Wilcom screen. These windows over here are just certain ones that you could have open. The object properties is pretty much what I always have, but in Wilcom you can actually I have mine set up here just because I've always had it used to being up here, but in Wilcom you could actually grab these and swing out these windows. So the digitizing inputs, as far as the menu, can be anywhere on the screen. You can set it to the side, you can set it to the bottom, but these are your tools for all your digitizing, and it kind of gives you the little icons similar to Pulse as far as your different choices here. When it comes to digitizing running stitches, it's pretty much the same thing as Pulse, and a lot of software is going to be the same thing because you are just plotting points on a single line. So a left click in Wilcom is going to be your cusp or your straight lines, and a right click is going to be curved lines. The only difference in this one is in Pulse, you do have the handles that you can see as you're working. This kind of just gives you the outline of what you're doing. Hitting enter does finish the line that you're working for and generates the stitches. As far as closing the shape, I believe there is a function that does that on here. I know you had it automatically kind of as a hotkey in Pulse.
Dun dun dun.
I thought there was. I thought I saw it here once. Anyways, that's for another show. But yeah, the plotting for manual stitches and running stitches are the same, except again, manual stitches are going to be a stitch everywhere you plot a point, and it's going to be only just the straight stitch. You don't have an option for a curve stitch. Column A, and if you hover over the tools in Wilcom, you are going to see the name of the tool and also the hotkey function. So this is, if you hit F4, you'll get the same function as far as the tool of column A. Column A is, again, real similar to the one that Jeff just showcased in Pulse, where it's going to be a point counterpoint, where you're going to click on the one side and over to the second side. So it's point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint. And how you plot those points are pretty much where the set angles are going to go. So if you have them perfectly vertically, or if you have them at an angle, that's where the angle lines are going to generate just from the points that you're plotting. Again, enter is going to be ending and as you can see, the angles are at those angles that I was plotting the points, but they also can come in here and you can edit. If you go into your node editing, you can edit those angles to change up the angles if needed. Another function, again, just the same as the running stitch. If you are plotting points, left click is going to be your straight point. Right click is going to be your curve points. And again, the way you plot the angles are going to show the angles that your satin stitch you're going to sew. So if you are, conscious on how you're plotting the points as you're digitizing, and the angles that you want to, go around a curve or something like that, if you're conscious to what you're doing as you're digitizing, you're not going to have to come back and adjusting the angles to as much as if you're just kind of going real fast, plotting points wherever you possibly can to make a shape. More than likely, you're going to have to go in and correct some angles. If you have some really drastic turns as far as angles, you're not going to want that, where the satin's going to want to try to get wonky and turn too quickly within a certain segment.
So, Justin, if I can interject here one thing.
Yeah.
If you guys are using Wilcom E4.5 and your screen doesn't look like Justin's screen, that's because all of the dockers, like he showed earlier, that fly out, he can customize it and position them where he wants. His is not the default workspace. So if it doesn't quite look the same, all the tools are still available there. It's just that he has moved them to a location that works better for his workflow.
Yeah,
Correct.
that's one thing about Wilcom that I like. Pretty much all these flyouts, you can move them to where you want. Top, bottom, side. You can even right click on here and you can close or open ones that you don't have open if you want. If you don't want a lot of clutter, or if there's a lot of things that you don't use, you can remove them just so you could have a little bit more working space. But yeah, I definitely don't have the default setting as far as the way this is laid out.
All right, and Matt, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say, you said all those tools are available. There are different levels of E4.5, so you won't have all of those tools. They're just hidden. Can you right-click on that menu again that you had, where it showed all the... If you notice, right underneath Zoom, there's a separator. Most of those are your add-ons that you can get to extend your tools. So,
Gotcha. Yeah, so... I don't have every single add-on on here, so there would be, if I were to purchase more elements, they would show up here. Because, like I said, you can turn off and on functions or different tools in your work area. The next satin input is called column B, or F5 for a hotkey. And again, that's going to be similar to the pulse, where you're going to be plotting one side first. If you hold Control on your keyboard when you're digitizing, that actually is going to constrain the line. So if you're wanting to do a perfectly horizontal line and you're just plotting points, if you hold Control down, it's going to go ahead and plot in that same exactly that 0 degrees that you're plotting in. It's just kind of a guide that helps you. The only difference between the column B input that is similar to the pulse, where you're doing one side, you actually hit enter. When pulse, Jeff came around the corner and went back the other direction. In Wilcom, you actually have to start back in your original placement and then work your way back to the end of the satin stitch. So you actually plot one side first, starting from, if you're starting from the left side, you plot one side, hit enter. You have to go back to the original spot. And so it's basically you're traveling in the direction of what your satin stitch is going to be sewing. Again, the way you plot the points is going to show stitch angles, but in column B, you actually have to go in and add the stitch angles. And there's a couple ways of doing this. If you are in node edit and you hold down Control and you right click, if you put on the edge of the outline of your object, you can kind of see that little line there that signifies that you're going to add an angle. If you right click, it'll actually add that angle line. And another way of doing it, there's actually a tool right here where it shows the little bent satin with some red lines into it with a plus. That's going to be adding stitch angles. And that's where you can actually come through and you just plot point, counterpoint throughout your satin and add stitch angles. And again, enter is going to end that function as far as adding more stitch angles. The next one would be your column C. F6 on your hotkey. There's a couple of different terms that different softwares use as far as this is basically where you're going to be plotting a satin stitch, but you're only going down and you're plotting the center point of that satin stitch. And then once you plot that point, you're actually going to be able to choose a value on how wide that satin stitch, and it's going to be a equal width throughout that satin, and you're gonna dictate that in the settings. I think there's satin steel on some software, they call it.
Yep,
What is it? Pulse calls it?
Impulse is called a steel, and I think I skipped that one, but
yeah,
Impulse is called a steel.
So yeah, that one is going to be, again, your plotting points, real similar to a running stitch. Left click is going to be your straight stitches. Right click is going to be your curved stitches. Once you hit enter, there's a couple of different ways to create the width of your satin. If you hit enter, you're still in the digitizing mode, and you could actually click and choose the width of your satin at that point. Or you could actually go into your settings here, and you have a width for your column width. So if you wanted that's 2 millimeters. You can set it to something wider, like 4 millimeters. A real cool aspect of this tool is if you were, say you were digitizing this square, and say that outline is like an outline of a fill area. One of the aspects of this tool is you could either do it center, where it's going to be exactly center of the tool. You can see the line that I actually plotted on the edge. It's going to be equidistant on either side, or you could actually offset it as well. You can either offset it outside of the line, or you could offset it inside of the line, depending on what percentage you want. And I use this tool a lot when I'm outlining like a fill, because I know bringing it into that fill area, it actually kind of creates more of an overlap where the fill edges end. And then if you bring it in, there's going to be more of an overlap to help compensate for that fill pulling in. As far as it pushing out, I digitize that manually to make sure that there's no fill pushing outside of the outline. But it's just a quick little thing where you can kind of overlap items just by using a percentage or a value to it. So those are all the ways to plot satin stitches in Wilcom. Then you get into the complex fill, and that's where you're actually just going to be plotting the outline of the object. Again, left click straight, right click curve. You hit enter, and it's actually going to close the object by itself. And then it'll actually ask for entrance and exit points and an angle. So it's going to be a multitude of things. And I had this. As you can see, I had the satin setting on. So I'm going to change that to a tatami. So within plotting the actual points, again, you're going to plot the points. You're going to hit enter to end that and close the shape. And if you can see down here, it's actually any prompt that you're going to need from tools that you're using. It's going to be down in the left-hand corner. It says enter point 1 on boundary, because if you wanted to add a cutout shape, this is where you would do it. So you hit enter past that. Now it's telling you add a entry point. So I'm going to add one here, exit point here, and now it's going to ask for your stitch angle. And as you can see, that's the angle that I put it at. The green diamond signifies your start point. Your red cross signifies your stop point. And as always, in node edit, you can change angles and node placement. On any of these tools as well, if you're on node edit, you could actually, if you select that node and you don't want it to be a curve, you wanted this to be a straight line, if you select that node and you hit the space bar, it actually toggles between straight and curve points. So these are a couple of kind of some, I guess it'd be software specific on those tools, right? Does Pulse have
Yeah, I mean, I have something similar, but it's more like a special. I consider it a specialty effect rather than just a standard object that you're plotting.
one? Right.
I'm pretty sure Hatch doesn't have those.
It does not, no.
Yeah.
But you can
So,
do it manually.
yeah. So one other thing that within, plotting a tatami fill, if you were to, and when it's asking you, if I hit enter or space bar to close that shape, it's telling you to enter your 0.1. If I wanted to add a cutout section, this is where I would do it. Start, stop, and then that adds a void. And there's another way of doing it is if you select your object you've already done, you realize, oh, I have to cut out. There's a tool over here that you can add holes. And then you just plot the point of your hole. And that'll cut it out as well. So pretty much throughout all the tools in Wilcom, it's going to be either point, counterpoint, down one side, outlining a shape, and your left click is going to be straight points, and your right click is going to be curve points. So that's the basics in Wilcom. We'll have Matthew take over and show you how to do it in Hatch.
Here we go. Bring out the big boy software.
Correct.
Let's see. Share screen. And allow. Add to screen. And okay. So now that I've joined in and I was kind of taking notes during Justin's little TED talk. So it looks like we're just kind of covering plotting different things in different software. So Hatch is going to be pretty much identical to Wilcom E4.5, minus the fact that there's less tools to do for like production speed up. So you have a bunch of different menus on the side. I don't have that floating little docker that he has where you can have all the different tools on the screen. But everything's underneath this digitize section. I don't think there's anything else of, yeah, it's just everything in digitizing. So what you see is what you get. So basically, I got digitize open shape. This is going to be your basic run. So same thing, left click, does the same thing, straight lines, right click is the curve node. One thing that Hatch has that 4.5 doesn't have is this close. At least I don't know where it is in 4.5. I looked for it the other day because our last live I saw this. It wasn't in Hatch 2. It's now in Hatch 3. So it was added. But one of the things I accidentally do all the time in 4.5 is I make my shape I want, but I accidentally selected the run tool, and now I just wasted all the time outlining. But I can go ahead, click this close up here, and it closes it off. Or if I want it to be flat, then I can do with a straight line, and there we go. So then I can make it a fill. That's how I can convert it back and forth between being just a run and a fill. I don't know if you guys showed that, but I don't think you did. But either way. And then there's a couple different things, so I can do different types of runs. And that's that. And then one of the tools that they both had, so Jeff was talking about the steel stitch in Pulse. Justin has the column C in Wilcom, which allows you to make like a satin stitch. In Hatch, there is no column C tool. So the column C is the one where you click your points and then it will just make a standard width satin all the way around. You have to do it a little bit more manually because it's all the same tool. So if I go digitize open shape, I can just go ahead and click these same, I don't know why I did that. So there's my shape. And over here is where I actually go ahead and choose what I want. So I want a satin. I go ahead, click that. Now you can see I have my satin, and it's going to be the same width all the way around, It's a 2.5. And unlike Wilcom 4.5, where Justin could do like a 20% or an 80% offset, depending on which way you're looking at it, I can only do center or 100. I don't have the option to adjust that. Luckily for me, I only do 0 or 100. So it worked fine for me. But if you're trying to use it to compensate for pull, that's where your software limitation is going to be. But it's not that hard to work around it. So there's that. And then stitch angles. So let's see. So just like Wilcom, you have the same keyboard shortcuts because it is the same company that makes it. So I know that Control H would, that was just H. Control H would bring up my, which it didn't, which is weird. Stitch angles, reshape. Oh, because it's because this is a run, not a fill. Losing my train of thought. I'm tired. Same thing as Justin said. You can change the type of nodes with space. Again, down here in the bottom, much like on Wilcom 4.5, you can. It kind of tells you what your current tool is, and so if I push space, it'll convert it from a regular straight node to a curved node. Simple, pretty basic. If I wanted to add stitch lines to this, I would have to break this apart. So if I just go ahead and select it, break apart, and now it's an actual fill. So I could technically make this a tatami fill if I wanted. I don't know why I would. But this is where I could do the stitch angle. So like, let's say I wanted this to be at a much stronger angle. I could go ahead and add a stitch angle. And I could do this. If that makes sense, but hopefully. Luckily, there's no comments to tell me that I'm not making sense right now. So, all right, let's see. What else did we have? Column A and B. That was one of the things we talked about in 4.5. So in Wilcom Hatch, we really only have one, and it's just digitizing blocks. So it's just the exact same thing as column A in 4.5. I forgot what it is in Pulse. But yeah, you basically point, counterpoint, as Justin said. So I just kind of work from one end and go down. So that's my shape there. I can make it a fill, except I didn't actually click it. And there we go. That's a pretty big object, but you get the drift of it. And then if I want to change the stitch angle, again, everything is under edit objects because I want to edit the shape, add stitch angle. And then actually, if I want to go straight across like this, there you go. You can see that. So the biggest difference between Hatch and 4.5 and the other softwares like Pulse and whatever is Hatch, they have everything buried under menus, which can either slow you down or speed it up because I want to digitize something, let's go to the digitize section. Or if I want to edit something, then I got to go to the edit. But other than that, you can do everything with just the run stitch. I mean, that's all this is. Going back to your basic fills. So digitize open shape. If I just do that, that's what you saw me do. Run stitch on, pretty boring and basic. If I do digitize close shape, that's where I can do an actual shape like this. And then that's where I can manipulate it. So if I want a satin border or a zigzag, whatever I want, or if I want it to be a fill, I can do that. Obviously can't do a satin because that would look really weird. But that's how you do that. If I got to digitize a hole, simply just click the button. And there you go. Now I got myself the hole there. Let's see. The other object or the other tool that they showed you is where you can click on. Let me just this one. So like they would go one direction, hit enter, and then they would come back the other way. I can't do that in here, so I would just have to manually like plot in my mind exactly how I'm going to do this. So that's the biggest issue with going between softwares. You kind of got to remember what software has each thing. And Hatch is meant more for the home user, so it has a lot more, or it makes it very clear that you have like standardized shapes. So like if I wanted a star, I could do a star in here, make that a fill. Granted, that's not going to look all that great because it's just one tatami fill. So that's where you got to use your different fills and everything. Plot your points a little bit better than what this would look like. And then one of the other things that we mentioned earlier was Justin showed I think it's called the star tool.
Mm-hmm.
Also creates kind of like a candle wicking knot, I think it's called. But that tool does not exist in Hatch, and that's kind of what I was saying before. Is you might not have it in your software, but there are ways to do it. So like I can still do it in here, but you have to know exactly how it's done. So using the digitized blocks, if I go ahead and pick a different color, I can go ahead and make it, and basically I just keep going around the clock positions until I think I do 3 of them or something. I don't remember why I'm picking it up, but it's something like this, Jeff, isn't it? You're not watching.
You're hitting straight points, not curve points. That's why it's.
Yeah, there we go. I'm tired. Duh.
I mean, with your object being 62 millimeters around too, that might cause a problem.
Yeah. It might cause some weird stuff. So within these software, the basic idea, if you look at it as a non-software specific, you're always going to have just the basic digitizing tools in any software. You're going to have your run stitches, your manual stitches, your satin stitches, and your fill stitches.
Well, let me ask you that, depending on the version you have. Because some versions, you don't have any tools.
This is true. I guess I'm saying at a digitizing level.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of how the tools are, where they're located in your software, how you use them, if there is a point counterpoint, if there is the column B in Wilcom where you actually can plot the first side, come back and plots the second side. Some things like the steel or the satin C, where you're plotting just a single point. There is something similar like in Hatch, but it doesn't allow you to do the percentages as far as offsetting it side to side. But even just bouncing around, seeing Matt use his tools in Hatch, plotting one shape, it looks like Hatch has a lot to do with just kind of plotting shapes and then applying a stitch type to it. He's basically plotting a running stitch, but then he can toggle it back to a satin stitch, or you can toggle it to a fill stitch. Something that Jeff and I did not showcase as far as those tools in Wilcom. They can toggle back and forth as well. It's a matter of the input method that you're trying to get your shape. Typically, like when I'm digitizing, you're inputting an input method, keeping in mind what type of stitch type you're looking for or you're using. Because, I'm going to plot a satin stitch a little bit differently than a middle stitch. But there is different ways of either shortcuts, or if you accidentally plot a shape, if you're plotting 100 points around a shape and you realize, I was in my run stitch tool, you can convert that to a fill stitch. It's just a matter of how that shape is plotted, and then you can apply those stitch types to the different shapes in any of these 3 softwares. So
Yeah, and
the
one
biggest thing I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You were just saying about how you can, like in Hatch, I have to go back and change what I want and everything. Like Hatch is more get what you want on there and then set it up after the fact. And that's the way a lot of the lower tier software, the hobbyist software is. Then when you get into the actual professional, where you have to care about how much time you spend in this. Because Justin, I don't know how many designs a day you do, but you don't want to sit there and have to keep on clicking, okay, run stitch, and then convert it to satin. You just want to be able to satin, boom, done, next object. So
exactly.
With all the other software, you might be able to, like in Hatch, I can click my digitize open shape, and if I do this right now, it's a run. But while it's selected here, I can go over here, hit satin, and then if I pick a different color just to demonstrate, it will now give me a satin. And then if I go to a different tool, come back, another color, this will also be a satin. So if you click your tool, and I'm pointing to the computer monitor like you can see, thanks, Jeff. If you click the tool you want, you can set your parameters, and then it'll save that. And you can, I know you can do that in 4.5. I'm not familiar with Pulse as much as I wish I was, but Jeff is shaking his head yes.
Yep. If you set your properties before you digitize an object, that's what your properties are going to be. If you set it after, then you're going to have to change it for the next object.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of times, again, you start getting into digitizing, you may not be on the exact tool that you're looking for as far as the stitch type that you're looking for. But if you're using the tool that plots the points in the way that you want to plot them, there's also adjusting them back and forth between stitch type. So, like Matt said, I think the more the hobby level or the prosumer level softwares out there, they're kind of approaching it in a way of, look at the shapes that you need to create and then apply stitches to it. The higher level, kind of geared towards digitizing in a full capacity like Wilcom 4.5 and Pulse DGML. Those are going to be where the tools are kind of geared towards the digitizing kind of approach, where you what direction you're going in, what stitch type you're looking for, and you plot in those ways from the get-go. But you also have those adjustments that you can use at any point, toggling back and forth. Shortcuts, like if you plot one point, one object, turn it into a fill, duplicate it, you can turn it in on C. Now you have a fill stitch with a satin border, and it's going to be the exact points that you plotted just once, duplicated stitch type change. So it's just a shortcut that you can use as well.
Awesome. Well, I think that goes and covers everything that we wanted to cover on plotting points. Everything that we've showed is not an end-all be-all. There are more because sometimes we forget what we showed and when we showed, because I know I skipped over the steel stitch in Pulse, but it's very similar to it is in Wilcom. So there are a lot of different input methods, and we broached most of them here. So I'm glad we were able to cover everything we wanted to. I'm just checking and I'm making sure I'm reading the title that we talked that I talked about what we were going over. But that is pretty much everything that we had planned for this live. Again, you guys will be watching this on Valentine's Day. We pre-recorded it so that we could spend that time with our families. Hopefully you can too. And if you guys do catch the recording, let us know. If you would like to join the conversation where all of us nerds hang out and talk most of the time, you can hop over to our Discord channel, embnerd.com/Discord. You can get an invite to the server, install it if you enjoy Discord. That's pretty much where we talk and hang out most of the time. So jump on over, join the conversation. Coming up here shortly is the Daxing Kansas City show. I'm going to be going to that. I don't think Matt is. Justin's definitely not because it's too far for him to fly. But the DAX show in Kansas City is the next one that's coming up here shortly. With that, I guess I'll go ahead and close this out. That's Justin Armenta from JA Digitizing Studios. We have Matthew Enderley from Passphrase. And I'm Jeff Fuller from Fuller Embroidery Works. We're all here representing the Embroidery Nerd. I'd like to thank you guys for hanging out with us, and we'll catch you next time.
Happy